Welcome back to Paper Cut Crafts. Today we're going to do a spanner card. So you take the front of your card and you cut it into strips. I cut these at 1 1/4 from both sides. And then I'm using the Whisper White for my highlight pieces or matte pieces, and those are 1 inch wide and 2 inch wide with a 1/4 inch border around both edges, or all the way around rather. And the circle is punched out of Whisper White as well. I have a mat here. I was going to try and do a masking technique with my stamps, but as I went through it I ended up not doing that. And I'm just going to attach all this stuff with the with a snail adhesive, and then I'm going to go ahead and stamp. I was making this card kind of as I went, so some of my steps that are shown here I did not actually use. This step I'm trying to figure out how my mat's going to work. The spanner card has it where the 2 edges open with a spanner piece in between as a first layer, with the second piece as your second layer. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to make this mask work with both the spanner piece covering the second piece. I'm going to be using the Peaceful Moments, even though I don't use the mask, as well as the Country Home stamp sets. I am still trying to figure out the mask with these, but I do end up using these stamp sets even though I don't use the mask. I'm also going to go ahead and stamp my 2 panel pieces. I'm going to use the decorative piece out of the stamp set, and I'm using the Bermuda Bay ink. These fit perfectly into my pieces that I cut with the Whisper White. For my span piece here, I am coloring it with a mix of blends as well as regular markers. I didn't have all the colors that I wanted to use in the blends, so I did end up using the regular markers, which worked out really quite well for what I was going for. Once I settled on the placement of the spanner piece and I realized that it wasn't going to fit exactly where I had wanted it originally, I decided that I would make it look like it was sitting on a table. So I'm using a journaling pen to draw a line across and then putting some detail in. And then I'm just using this as my spanner piece. I will then put a piece of window sheet behind it to reinforce the span, just so that I'm not relying on the edges of the punch circle to hold it together. I'm just trimming down the window sheet to fit the proportion that I want, so it's not showing as much, but it still is spanning the piece. This is not a Stampin' Up trimmer, but we do have one. This one I just had before I joined as a demonstrator. I use snail to attach the spanner piece to the window sheet, but I'm going to use the glue dots to attach the window sheet to the edge pieces that are the first layer of the span. I was going to use the jewels to hide the glue dots, but I discovered when I put it on that because of the placement of the glue dots on the stamped image, they didn't actually show. So I decided not to use the jewels in my final card. Here I'm just adding a couple of glue dots rolled into smaller balls along the edge of the punch circle just to reinforce the attachment. It's a bit of a large circle, so I want to make sure that it was spanning the card in a reinforced manner. Now for the second panel, I decided that I will use my blends to color in this image that I'm using on the inside. And as I normally do when I'm doing multiple layered with my blends, I always use the light color and then highlight with the dark and blend it in a second time with the light. For the third layer and the final layer, I am cutting down another piece of Whisper White cardstock to use on the inside. This is just where I'm going to write my greetings to whomever I send this card to. Once I get that centered, I will go ahead and trim off the extra on the bottom. Here is my final card with the front layer spanning that second layer and then the third layer underneath. I want to thank you for watching. Hope you like it. Leave a thumbs up and subscribe. Happy stamping!